Hey, Pastor George, how's it going?
Hey, Chris, it's going well. How are you?
Doing all right. It's good to see you. Excited to be back for another conversation with you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our time together last week. Great group of young adults. Wow.
Man alive. We got some good ones. I'm excited for their voices in this conversation.
Yeah.
As we talk about life after college, because it's weird. It really is. Oh my goodness.
It is weird.
And today, I think we're talking about friendships, relationships, and friendships. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm learning a lot and want to hear more about what relationships are like at that stage of life and how the transition to life after college starts to change the way people think about relationships these days.
Awesome. I love that. Well, if you're ready, I'll invite our young adults into the room.
I'm ready.
Hey, everybody.
Hey!
Hi.
Howdy.
Wow, we're back. We got the crew back together.
Thank you very much for the conversation. I've been thinking about it and I went back over it and really, I was so impressed with the depth you guys brought to it. Thank you. I'm glad to be a fly on the wall.
We just want to continue the conversation we had last week. And like we said, this series is called Life After College is Weird. And today we're going to talk about friendship. But I just want to start, before we get into this idea of friendship, what is it like? I guess, Miko, you're the closest one to really graduating, and Sonia has been graduated for a little bit now. What's weird? What maybe do you anticipate being weird about life after college? Do you guys have any things that are like, when you think about what's weird about that life after college, what stands out to you?
I think just being away from friends and not just having like the same easy access to community that, I usually have. When I get hungry, I just go to a local restaurant or to the school cafeteria, and I run into a few friends every single time, and we just have all these spontaneous hangouts, which is super fun. And so after college, I will probably have a lot less of those, and I think that's a little weird.
I definitely agree. And I think one thing that's really weird is that up until this point, majority of our life trajectory has been determined by just having to go to school and whatever your parents recommend, and then after college, you kind of have to decide what career am I going to have? What am I going to do? And it's largely up to you, which is both freeing and also scary.
Yeah, paralyzing, right? All of a sudden, there's an infinite number of possibilities, and you've been in this track, right?
Everything is shifting at once, right? It's like your social places are shifting, your work is shifting, the normalcy you've had of consistency of school is shifting. It's like there's so much transition. And specifically today, we want to talk about friendship. And so as we enter into the conversation of friendship, I'm just curious, what does friendship mean to each of you? I'm kind of throwing in a new question. What does friendship mean to you? And what does it look like for you to make friends in your life? How have you done that? I just always think that's a fascinating question that I've started asking this year. So I'm going to pose it to y'all.
And I think in the past, I tended to gravitate towards people who thought like me and who did the same things as me in terms of common interests and were in the same communities. But the older I get, especially in college and moving out of that, I realized the importance of having friends from different backgrounds and just not necessarily people that reconfirm what I believe necessarily or that do the same things as me. And so to answer your question, I think that I try to surround myself by people who challenge me, whatever challenge might look like, whether that be challenge me academically or intellectually, but also maybe emotionally in terms of dealing with certain issues. And I think that's a step away from maybe in the past when I have just had more not opportunistic, but friends of circumstance, because as an adult, you get to choose your own path kind of thing. And so you don't have to have as many friends of circumstance. You can kind of just have friends that you choose, if that makes sense.
And something I was seeking out in friendship were people who were excited about who I was and where I was in my life now, but also saw a future for me and wanted to keep me accountable to my goals and to the things that I said were important to me. And they wanted to move forward with me and not just leave me where I was, but we would grow together. And so that's something that I definitely experienced in college. And now, as I am becoming a post-grad, some of the conversations we're having are the friendships I had in college also some of them friendships of convenience, whether I lived with you or we lived in the same neighborhood or things like that. How do you pursue those friendships after all of the things that were quote unquote easy about those friendships, whether location or schedule, are gone? So that's kind of something I'm thinking about in friendship in this season.
Yeah, I can relate a lot to that, Sonia. I think my definition of friendship has changed a lot, from high school to now. In high school, I always surrounded myself with people who, really valued cheap humor, people who encouraged me to do really stupid things and things like that, and just things that were very destructive for me. And they didn't, I got the sense that they didn't really care for me. They just cared about, the things that I did. And so since college, my definition of friendship has changed a lot. And I've begun to understand the importance of surrounding myself with people who can challenge me, people who can hold me accountable with my walk in Christ, people who can sharpen and expand my mind and the ideas that I have. And the way that I kind of go about making those friends is, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I don't meet, all my friends at the same place. It just all happens at random places, random points. It's just kind of odd. I just smile and I say hi and I ask them how they're doing, and I just get the ball rolling from there. And so, that's how I've tended to make a lot of my friends in life.
So I have about maybe 3 friends from high school that I still keep in contact with, and kind of not in a negative way, but to compare the friendships that I had growing up and then up to the friendships that I have now in college. The big difference is the fact of the people that I went to high school with, they aren't believers. And so mostly my main friend group are people from the in community, and just to see how the conversation goes and flows. A lot of it can be superficial, or they were superficial in high school. And I never sometimes, especially being in a community like the Inn, kind of reflecting on those conversations of the people in high school. Just so superficial, and I would just kind of leave those conversations not really feeling anything. Not that I don't want to say I'm trying to get something out of a friendship, but it is mutual. And that encouragement goes both ways. That challenging factors goes both ways. And so I feel especially with high school, a common factor that you talk about is just what are these people up to now? And you gossip. And so a lot of those things happen compared to with my friends who are believers now. We're constantly talking about and genuinely with intention, how are you doing? How is this season in your life going? And wanting to talk through that with one another and encourage and be accountable, as Mika was saying, I think is so important. And sometimes I feel you can gauge, it's not in a first conversation you have with someone, you can be what are your values? That's just so awkward, So I feel given just tone, right? Just given tone and demeanor and how those conversations go and how they flow naturally, you can get a sense of what those values are, and if they match well with yours. And then from there, you want to interact with that person more, so you ask them to hang out. And sometimes I feel people know it's if it doesn't click, it doesn't click, and you just continue and you go on, right? But you're not going to be butthurt, and that person isn't going to be either, because it just didn't click, and some people just don't mesh. But just kind of gauging it and having that kind of sense is I don't know, a good thing to have. So
something that I am looking forward to in friendship, specifically post-grad, is having a multi-age range of friends. I think in college, 90% of the people I'd spend the most time with were of my age. I did have a little bit of a difference because I was a Young Life leader. And so I was, I was on a high school campus weekly. And so I have students I'm pursuing who are also friends of mine now. But also I moved to the city and I moved to Seattle where I knew nobody. And I loved the adult network I had in my hometown of adults who were on my side, who were excited about me, who wanted to have dinner with me at their houses and things like that. And so for me in college, what was so cool is that through Young Life and through a couple of different opportunities, I was able to meet kind of adults in the community who wanted to quote unquote adopt a college student and care about me and things like that. And so moving forward, I am so excited to have friends in college, recently out of college, couple years out of college and beyond, because I think the more voices and the different voices I have in my life, the more richer my life will be and the better decision-making strategies I will have if I can get opinions from people who remember what it was like to be in post-grad and can speak to the season I'm in. So wanted to mention that.
Well, Sonia, can I just interrupt and say, where do you expect to make those friendships?
Like meeting people at church or a lot of fundraising dinners, we meet as Young Life leaders every week and different families will host us for dinner. And so as we're eating dinner at their home as a group, we'll get to know them and relationships like that will form. And so I've kind of attached myself to a couple different faith organizations. And from there, they have networks that I've kind of like tagged into. So.
Good, thanks.
I do think, building on that, it's very important to have friends that are non-believers as well, because especially with my background, am I cutting out? Hello? Okay. Yeah, sorry. Especially with my background, I would say I have like an even split of non-believer and believer friends. And yes, the conversations are very different, but similar to how we should surround ourselves with people from different generations, I think surrounding ourselves with people with different belief systems is also a good way to reinforce our faith as well. And I feel like that's like embracing a diversity of friendships, not only in terms of like race and age, and also beliefs, is very important to continue to challenge ourselves. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
I love that, Tori, and that kind of leads into what I've been thinking about as a follow-up question. All of you talked about there was like a shift in point where your friendships looked one way and now you're thinking about friendship in a different way. What inspired that shift for y'all? Like, what is it? Like, what was the thing that happened that you're like, oh, you know what? My friendships looked like this and now I want friendships to look differently. Was it just coming to college, or what was it? Was there something that kind of initiated that shift for y'all?
For me, it was joining Young Life. Before I was part of Young Life, I would just hang out with folks who looked like me, who had the same interests as me, and believed similar things. And then when I became a part of Young Life and just saw the diversity in just about everything, I started to experience more just joy in general. Different people bring out different parts of me. And so, being able to experience that on a regular basis encouraged me to keep on pursuing, different looks of friendship.
Just like as Miko said, like that kind of changed for him when he joined Young Life. Same thing goes for me when I joined the In community more regularly this past year. And when I became more involved, and then I went out to California to visit those friends, and that friend particularly, and we had a conversation after months. And it's just crazy, like how like awkward that conversation was. But also, like, I want to say too, it's like, it's not like it wasn't like a flip of a switch. It was kind of like gradual, where those conversations like were ceased, or it's like we weren't really conversating like we used to. But it wasn't until that conversation we had in person where I'm just like, wow, like our values are so different, and like they've changed now given the couple of years that we've spent apart growing in separate places and in different communities too. And that's just where like my turning point was, just kind of like always going back to like those values. I think for me personally is just like so important. And where like for me, those conversations like really like stem from, and how those challenges are being like, I guess, arisen from that, or those like encouragements. But I just like wanted to reiterate, like, it's definitely gradual, that change. It's not like a flip of a switch, but definitely the communities that you immersed yourself in a way, and especially like good ones and healthy ones, in a way, like they're going to shape you, and they're going to shape the way you befriend people. But like, it's going to be like, you're not even going to realize it until you're put in a situation and you recognize it, and you'll be like, wow. And then that's where just like reflection and processing comes from.
I was introduced to the in community very early on, which I'm so thankful for, because it was just wild to move to a city, and within like 2 days, somebody knew me. And it was like, whoa, that's a big deal. And then from there, they introduced me to other people. And what I noticed was the love between people. And I noted to myself, I said, nowhere on my campus is this happening except here. And I just saw that it was different, and I wanted that. And so the more I hung around that community of people who knew each other, were around each other, asked really good questions, I noticed that they were investing in each other. And they asked the hard questions, and they were present, and they met with people regularly, and they wanted to build relationship. And so for me, I just saw something greater, and I said, okay, well, my life is mine. I'm no longer riding on my family's coattails of relationships. I'm no longer riding on the support system of high school, right? Who you sit with at lunch. It's really easy to have friends in high school if you all sit at lunch together every day, right? That's not a thing in college. So if that's what I'm seeking, that's what I need to do. And that's what I need to carve out time for. And so that's kind of how I went about noticing that shift, wanting that shift, and pursuing that shift in relationship, because I knew it was possible, because I saw upperclassmen doing it, and I saw people in my new sphere of life doing it, and I said, that's what I want. And so I came here for an education, and I walked away with ridiculous friendships of all ages and grade levels and college, non-college. That was actually the funniest thing. I did not anticipate having friends in my community in college who weren't actually college students. That was interesting to me. If you would have told me that in high school, I don't know if I would have believed you, but that was quite interesting. So yeah, that for me kind of led the shift into, okay, let's do something different here.
When I came to college here, I knew no one my age. And so that was an opportunity to, I don't want to say reinvent myself, but like reevaluate what friendships meant to me and what communities I wanted to apply myself to. I want to echo like what the rest have said in terms of like, I think just as you grow and mature and you reflect upon your own values, it just so happens that you gravitate towards certain people in certain communities, and it's not so much as a particular event that causes you to make that change, but maybe there'll be like a conflict or something where you suddenly realize like, oh yeah, my friends are different, and I don't necessarily resonate as much as someone that I used to. And I think that's just part of life, really. And yeah, it's been a good journey, knowing that will just continue to progress as we grow in our values and as we move into different stages of life. And yeah, I've also been really blessed to have friends that weren't from college too. I'm very involved in the salsa dance community in Seattle, and a lot of them are not believers. And I have a very good friend who's this kind of 60-year-old Latino guy, and if I describe my friendship to anyone else with him, they'd be like, that's kind of odd. But he's kind of been like my dance mentor of sorts. And that's been a very life-giving friendship for me. And so I think also it has to do with making friends in this stage of life, has to do with being willing to step out of your comfort zone. Because I feel like in the past, it's very easy to just have friends of convenience and just be friends with those people who are in your class. But in college, really, you get what you make of it. And so you could choose to sit and not really do anything with your experience sitting at home, but you could also choose to pursue passions or communities and just put yourself out there. And usually that results in a flourishing of friendships that you never would have had otherwise.
That's fantastic. Pastor George, I want to flip this question on you. We've heard from young adults. How do you make friends right now in your place in life? Where do you make friends?
A lot of my closest friends right now actually are people that I met through my wife. And this is going to sound like I'm lazy, but I think because of children had this effect, like what we did with our kids, we ended up doing with the parents of those kids, like their friends' parents started to become just people that we would spend time with. So that's a big part of it. I think church for me also has been a place where I connect with people and meet new people constantly. And I love that. I love that the diversity of people that I come across here. But it doesn't mean they're all friends, right? I have a lot of what they would call weak ties, associations, but not people I'm necessarily tracking with. This will sound funny, and maybe this tells you more about life as a pastor than an adult, but I have on my bureau a list, a little yellow pads, like one of the small yellow pads, and it has friends. And because I interact so much socially with so many people, it's easy for me to forget who are the people that I'm intentional about tracking with. So when I get stuck or want to call someone or reach out or whatever, I want to know who are the people that I've kind of committed to. And so I've just written, and that sheet's been on my bureau for probably 8 years. And then there are probably only about 6 names on it. Those are the people that I keep coming back to.
That's awesome. I feel like I need to do that. That's so good. Okay, I am just grateful. I'm picking up so much from all of y'all, and what I'm hearing is like making new friendships and making friends happens so often from putting yourself in new experiences. It's you take a risk, you go someplace you haven't before, you try something new, you hit it off, and you start talking, and either you keep talking or you don't. It's like there's not necessarily a rhyme or reason to it, but you just got to try and put yourself out there, which is really cool. How does Jesus interact with your idea of friendship and maybe shape, or how has he reshaped your view of friendship and how you make friends? How does Jesus fit into all of this, really?
I think I was like watching this sermon on YouTube, and they put it very well, that there's a difference between shaping God around your relationship and shaping your relationship around God. And so I think for me, it's really about making Jesus the center, and making like his will, your will, regardless of whether or not the other person is a believer or not. I think that if you continually let him into that, it does affect the relationship. And I think the other thing I'll say is I think through knowing Jesus, we know a lot more how to love and love deeper and more like him. And I think that friendships based upon love that is patient, that is kind, that is sacrificial, and that is selfless, that really results in, just a different kind of friendship than if that wasn't an intentional thing that you're choosing to let into it. Mm-hmm.
You were talking about how all of us, when our community, reflect different aspects of God, and how we need everyone to show up and not conform to being all the same or thinking the same, but they need to show up with their opinions and their experiences and their backgrounds and their likes and their dislikes, because all together we show up and form the kingdom, right? All of us a little bit different. And I think I took that idea into my friendships, and really pursuing friendships that cause me to think differently, to challenge my preconceptions, to make generational friendships, things like that. Because the more people in my life I can have that think differently, live differently, come from different places, the more I'll get to experience of the kingdom on an intimate level. And the second thing that Jesus has done in my friendships is he's given me these two views of my friends and the people around me. And he has brought me to love my friends exactly as they are right now. I love, for example, my roommate Erin, she just walked in. I love who she is and I love who she's becoming. And me as her friend, I get to see her like Jesus does. I get to see where he's taking her. I get to speak truth over her life. I get to see her gifts now and the things that I can encourage her in now so she can move towards who he's calling her to be, right? And so in that, there's two aspects. It's finding that group of friends and all different kinds of people in your life from all different walks of life, and then also loving them in the moment and speaking them into who they're going to be and who they're becoming. And so that has been really transformational in college, especially as we're all growing up together. And we're all making different kinds of choices, whether it's what to do after we graduate or where do we want to live. And being able to walk with friends through those transitions has been really cool.
I will say, I'm just going to throw in there, that's so fantastic because you said in college you're all growing together, and so you have to love each other as you are and as you're becoming. That doesn't stop. As someone who's, 10 years almost out of college now, that I'm still growing. And it's when I forget that I'm still growing and my friends are still growing that our friendships start to hit some roadblocks. And so that's such a good word.
Jesus has really reshaped the way I view friendship by encouraging me to pursue more depth in my friendships and to also be more mindful of the folks I spend the most time with. I think it was like my sophomore year. I made it a goal to, like every, other day, like go to the cafeteria and just sit with like a new person and just make a new friend. And it was super fun. I met a lot of cool people, and I'm grateful for those friendships that, were out of my comfort zone. But it got to the point where I was just like, oh, dang, I know like everybody at the school, but nobody knows me, and like nobody knows the real me. And so Jesus, like, my junior and this year just told me to kind of chill a little bit with the friendships and to focus on more intentionality. And, one thing that's kind of been common for me is like, if I have some beef with a friend and we're not getting along, I'm just going to move on to another friend because, I got so many friends. Why not? They're just like dispensable. And so he's been helping me to endure those tough times with those friends and to always come back to reconciliation and getting through those difficult moments so that the relationship can really, flourish.
In this season right now, like it's completely different to what like my friend is going through, but there are things that like she can bring to the table for me, and then like vice versa. But sometimes just like given me and like my personality, I can be like, I want to fix everything, and like I want to like fix not particular people, but like the situation, and I want to be there for them like 100%. And sometimes that involves me like tearing myself down. And what God has just been teaching me, and that is like to like trust in Him and like trust that relationship, and also like trust that like He's working in that in that friendship, in that relationship too. And when I say like in that relationship for like the both of us and like I guess the health of that relationship, but then also like for like what my friend is going through, I think like a lot of trust has to come in with that, and also like just be cognizant of like what he's doing and like be cognizant of like the time that he's putting in that relationship too, because sometimes I feel like it should be like a quick fix, and like I want to say the exact words that's going to help that person, but I don't have the capability to do that sometimes, but like he does, right? And so I just think seasons and stuff too, I think it's so important as of right. And also actually I'm going to scratch that. I wanted to go back to what Sonia was saying about how she's encouraging her friend of like who she is and like who she's becoming. And I think what's so cool is that like we have the eyes to see our friends and our peers as God sees them. And I think that's so cool, but also so interesting because like we don't think that of ourselves. And like an example of that is I was talking about like last week how I'm kind of going through this like career change of like whether I'm pursuing medicine or going into ministry. And when I came to my friends like with that kind of like realization, they're like, "Oh, I already knew that of you." And I already knew that you wanted to do that. And I was just like, "What do you mean? Like I've never talked about this before." They're like, no. Like I knew that like in some way like medicine just like wasn't the thing for you. And I see like all this joy that you bring to the table when you talk about ministry and how like you're just like a fire is just like lit. And I was just like, well, how come, first of all, I was like, how come no one's told me this before? I'm wasting all my time. But then secondly, I like took a step back and I'm like, wow, I have these great friends who really admire me and like see me and like see what I bring to the table. And like they can seek that out and like encourage me and advise me for that. And so I'm like blushing even thinking about it because I think it's just like, I'm like getting hot. I just think it's so cool. I'm just like so grateful for those friendships and just like the eyes that God has provided like them for like us to like see each other in those friendships. It's so important, so real.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I've learned is that I'm the best friend to other people when I have a constant connection with God. Tori, you brought up the fruits of the Spirit, and like yes, like I'm such a better friend when I have that quiet time and the solitude, and I'm able to get into the Word regularly. And when I'm not, then I'm just grouchy, and I view the friendship as like transactional, and it's just like very shallow. And so I mentioned like God's been teaching me depth in the relationship, but that depth really just stems from my relationship with God.
Everyone's coming from a very different place and with a very different idea of how to care. And so recognizing that like, one thing that someone does might not mean the same thing to another person, and just recognizing that my friends do love me just in different ways than I do. And for us to be able to come to an understanding of that is actually quite beautiful. And another thing is that learning that like I don't have all the answers, and there's a reason that these friends are in my life. If I just had to face everything on my own, I would definitely come out with a very different outcome than what I have, like with all my friends, being able to give me advice on certain things, giving me perspectives that I would have not have come to if I didn't have them. And so it's been, like a humbling experience knowing that, I don't have all the answers. I'm like you, Nishadi. I am a control freak. To some extent too, and so giving that up and knowing that like listening to different perspectives is very important, and has taught me a lot about how to manage my life and go through it. Mm-hmm.
I think the two biggest things I've learned in friendship is it's okay to ask other people how they'd like to be loved, and it's okay to tell other people how you'd like to be loved and supported. You don't have to guess. It's not a guessing game. In mature friendships, you can say, hey, I know this week is going to be really rough for you. How can I support you? And you can tell people, hey, actually, next week is going to be rough. Like, can you ask me these 3 questions on Wednesday? Can you show up for me in this way? And I have found more often than not, people are so glad. They're like, I had no idea how to approach that. Thanks for giving me a heads up. Or I could tell that something was off. Like, I appreciate you communicating that. And so that's the biggest thing I've learned is like, if you know what works for you, tell them, but also be open to new things, right? Maybe a friend has a really cool idea for your advice, and you get to expand the way that you give and receive friendship and love in that way. And the second thing is, your friends care about you and they think you're awesome, and you're allowed to think that about yourself too. One thing that somebody challenged me to do at the beginning of this year is to spend as many days in agreement with Jesus about who I am, right? Jesus thinks I'm awesome. I can think I'm awesome. Jesus thinks I'm creative. I can think I'm creative. My friends think I'm caring. I can think I'm caring. And the same level of grace and forgiveness we give others, we can give to ourselves, even though it's 10 times harder. That's often what we need. So
this is so rich. And what I'm hearing is interesting. It seems like you're all working with a kind of a tension. On the one hand, there's something about being challenged in a relationship that you value. There's also something about resonating with someone. A couple of you talk about they resonate with me. And there's a tension between resonance and what feels sort of natural on the one hand, and sort of diversity and difference that actually provokes me to become a better version of myself, and seems like both of those things are important at the same time. What I'm realizing is, you guys are going through this transition from college into life after college, and that's weird. All of us are in transition, though, right? No matter how old or young we are, we're all moving through transition. And particularly now in our culture where so much is changing and so much needs to change, we need to get better at transition. So in some ways, you guys are resident experts. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Pastor George. Do you have a final question or word or?
Thank you. That's it. Really appreciate everybody's time. It's good to get to know you better. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.